Hello and welcome. Today I will be performing a massage on the beautiful model Emmy. We're going to work on the left shoulder pec and its relationship to the arm all the way to the hand. Let's go ahead and get started. So first, we will start by palpating Emmy's hands. This helps the brain to wake up and starts our conversation on a positive note. It's not as aggressive or jostling. I enjoy using my hands for two separate reasons. One, I will place on her shoulder to create that conversation with her mind, and the other hand will hold right onto her wrist to see, as I rotate the forearm back and forth, if this is affecting any of the tonicity or placement of her shoulder joint. It gives me a chance to tune in to any tonified areas, misaligned areas in the wrists, in the forearms, and apply pressure as needed. So right now, I have pinned between both bones. There is a lovely muscle ligament right here, and it can get really tight. So I put a little pressure there and come into her hand and start palpating for any tension in the palm, in the top of the hand, and see how the hand relates to any tension in the wrist. For Emmy specifically, I am feeling a lot of tension around this bone right here that is connected to the soft, meaty pad that's under your thumb. These guys are related. They work together a lot of the times. So the tension I feel closer to the elbow joint is relative to the tension I feel in her thumb. And as I pin that elbow joint and the muscles surrounding this bone, I can also create pressure and traction from the thumb and into the hand. Gently stripping the fascial tissue and the muscle development that's around this bone and joint. And so then I'll grab her thumb and just kind of lift and let gravity help me create space. And at the same time, just very lightly, drag my fingers down to encourage that space. Now, some people have looser joints, in which case you would not use this technique or that much pressure. We don't necessarily want them to be popping around, but for those with tight hands and tight wrists, it can create a lot of relief. So now I'm going to work on these extensors, because I can feel that in order to get to her shoulder, I need to release some of the restrictions. In order to get into her shoulder, I need to release some of the restrictions in her forearm and her hand. So I will come into this tissue right between the bones, pin the extensor with a nice amount of pressure, considering my patient. And begin and see how the tension in her hand relates to these flexors. The trick with the forearm is really about tuning in to the tissue between both bones. This is where you will find the most relief and shift the tension most effectively. That can be from the top, and similarly from the inside here. Now, as we start to release the tension in the forearm, I'm specifically feeling a shortness between Emmy's bicep insertion and origin. So now I know that the muscular work in here and the tension that's in her elbow, now I know that the muscular work here and the tension in her elbow is leading us to a shortened bicep. And that bicep inserts right here past the soft pad on the inside of the elbow. Now, biceps can be very tender, so be gentle when you're working on it. Sometimes they're hard to pin down, and it can be a little shocking. So I suggest to go slow and use a greater surface area of your hand so as not to startle them or be too deep. Right now, I'm just slowly encouraging length and distance with that insertion into the elbow. It seems to gather a lot of tension in that area. And the whole time, my goal is this shoulder joint. But shoulders, like we do, my whole goal is to get to this shoulder joint. Shoulders tend to get caught in the fight or flight or the sympathetic part of our nervous system. Therefore, if it's protecting anything, it won't really let me in until I pay attention to the areas it's trying to protect. Okay. Now we're ready to focus a little bit more on the joint itself. I enjoy putting my whole hand on the anterior deltoid or the front part of the shoulder joint socket. And as I do this, I'm applying pressure to the tension and the adhesions I feel in her hands, always reminding her that these two things are related. Something I have noticed with Emmy is that this collarbone floats a little bit higher, a little bit closer to the ear. So the collarbone is in relationship with this joint. And I'm trying to see if I can help it come back to a more aligned position. Anytime you're going into someone's armpit, be gentle. It is a vulnerable, sensitive area. Okay, cool. And always come back. It's nice to repalpate the hands, repalpate the bottom, the forearm. We're trying to get blood flow from the hand to the heart, from the heart to the hand. So now I'm feeling a relationship between that tension in her thumb to the tension in her traps. So I've got both in my hand and I'm giving each pressure back and forth, trailing up the scalenes a bit because that is where the tension is leading me. And moving farther down the trap, giving it some traction and pulling it kind of outward and down towards the hip. Okay, we're going to shift positions here. So now I'm going to come in and more specifically work with the left collarbone and its relationship to the sternocleidomastoid, the scalenes, and these muscles on the side of the neck that we tend to have a lot of tension with. Remember, this is a mobile joint. It needs range of motion is usually what we're after. So using the different angles in which this arm functions on its day-to-day basis may help you unravel the knots and the adhesions a little bit easier. Plus, it's much more natural for their brain and the way their neurotransmitters connect us to our body. Another great technique, sometimes when the shoulders are rolled forward, which happens a lot with school and office jobs, any place where you're having to sit for long periods of time, we can tend to roll our upper body forward and down, as if being dragged. So a nice technique is to use the fingers underneath the scapula and find a dense spot and just give a little pressure up. All the while, I like to hold on to the hand to allow any range of motion or shifts in the joint that will help it release. Now we're coming in to the pec minor attachments and the pec major. The pecs will definitely be a part of that shoulder rolling forward. So I'm going to come down. As we come back into the collarbone, we're going to start working on the pec as well, and its relationship to this tension in her neck. So just get your fingers right underneath this collarbone and just a little pressure into the bone, just a little bit, will help us start understanding where the tension is occurring. At the same time, I have my fingers pressing up into her traps, as if pinching these areas together. A few contraindications for this work would be a separated shoulder, where a ligament is actually separated and severed within the collarbone and the shoulder joint. Do not want to pull that apart any farther. Another contraindication would be frequent or recent dislocations. That will most likely require more stability and less lengthening of the muscles that are trying to keep it in place. Now we've come into a deep pec attachment here. And I'm going to be gentle because it's a tender area. And similarly to the bicep, hard to pin down. Sometimes you can actually press the head, the ball back into the socket of the shoulder. Just a little pressure. And so now I'm going to come in and hold her hand with my right hand and come more into the tender area. Now this area is soft, and make sure she's comfortable. Don't go in with fingers. Go in with a larger surface area to palpate. A lot of the times the brain and the nervous system can forget about this area. It's not touched as much. So we just come in and palpate. You can start to work with me to open this up. And when you come into the rib cage, light pressure. And so now I've placed the tips of my fingers in there with no pressure, but I am gently looking for tension and meeting it with a flat surface area on the opposite side on top of the joint. You don't have to be deep. This is already intense. Oh, all right. Okay. After something like that, go ahead. Traction and a little jostling can help the blood flow. So it's nice to come into these top insertions. And I personally like to strip the scalenes more than the SCM. But that's only because that's where my pain is. Ooh. Oh. All right. And once again, I'm going to palpate her hands as we finish the massage. Bring her back into reality. And this concludes our video. Thank you for joining us in this video today. If you enjoyed it and you would like to see more, please tune in to our Patreon page. I hope you have a beautiful week.